Good evening. I'm Joel Houston. Tonight, I'm going to read you the story of Ruth. A story of redemption, character, and loyalty. Ruth's story is ordinary, but it's powerful. Perhaps that is what makes this story so compelling, because it is ordinary. She doesn't come from a wealthy, famous family or hold a courtly position. She is simply a widow in a foreign land. And yet the life of a poor woman who has nothing becomes so important that it's included in the Bible, and her name is recognized in the lineage of Jesus. Now, before we begin, as you settle in to rest, imagine yourself listening to the sound of a crackling fireplace, warming your room. The sizzling fire snaps softly. The warmth and cozy sounds relax you and soothe your running thoughts. Take a deep breath in. Hold it momentarily. And now fully exhale. Release any tension you may be holding in your shoulders. All you need to do right now in this moment is take another slow, deep breath in and out. God has stillness, comfort, rest, and rejuvenation for your soul. He is with you right now, working all things together for your good. You are His child. You are His beloved. Now, as we take this journey together, we find ourselves on a road traveling to another place, another time. This is a story that takes place around 1200 BC, in the time of the Judges. A great famine has plagued the land, and in the midst of this unprecedented lack, there lived in Bethlehem the Elimelech family. They were Ephrathites, which means people from the bountiful place of Judah. Now Elimelech and his wife Naomi and their two sons, Mahlon and Chilion, decided to relocate to Moab in search of food. But sadly, in this foreign land, Elimelech suddenly passed away. It was crushing news that no wife ever wants to hear. But some morsel of joy slowly found its way back into Naomi's heart when her two sons found wives of their own and married. Her heart was filled with the hope of an heir that would save their family and allow them back to their family farm in Israel. One married a Moabite woman named Orpah, and the other a Moabite woman named Ruth. But sadly, about 10 years later, both Mahlon and Chilion died, and there was no heir to carry on the Elimelech name. Naomi's dreams were dashed. Her heart was broken yet again. She felt completely hopeless. Not only was she now a widow, which constituted her the lowest class of beggars, she was now a widow in a foreign land, without the protection of any son or any man. Heartbroken and alone, in desperation, she decided to go back home. She gathered her few belongings and told her sons' wives she was returning to Bethlehem. To her surprise, they both chose to come with her. So the three of them began their 30-mile journey across the Moab desert. The dusty and treacherous terrain only seemed to mirror what was in Naomi's heart: barren, broken, and dry. As she thought about her situation, her age and lot in life, she knew she was too old to remarry and bear children. She thought about the two young women who had loved her sons and had brought them joy, who now journeyed into the unknown with her. They were still young. Her feet suddenly felt heavier across the dust and pebbles at this fate-sealing choice at what it would bring them. Naomi knew Ruth and Orpah would be destined to a life of solitude if they stayed with her. Why should they waste their youth on her? Why should they leave their land to enter a new land with a different culture? She had done it herself, and now her hands were empty with nothing to show but a broken heart. Would she want the same fate for her former daughter-in-laws? Breathless, she had to stop and make her heavy heart known. Go back to your mother's homes, and may the Lord reward you for your kindness to your husbands and to me. May the Lord bless you with the security of another marriage. She then kissed them goodbye, and they all broke down and wept. No, they said, we want to go with you to your people. But Naomi replied, why should you go on with me? Can I still give birth to other sons who could grow up to be your husbands? No, my daughters. Return to your parents' homes, for I am too old to marry again, and even if it were possible, and I were to get married tonight and bear sons, then what? Would you wait for them to grow up and refuse to marry someone else? No, of course not, my daughters. Things are far more bitter for me than for you. Again they wept together. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye. But Ruth had a different heart than her sister-in-law. She clung tightly to Naomi with all her heart and might. Look, Naomi said to her, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. You should do the same. But Ruth replied, don't ask me to leave you and turn back. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Wherever you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord punish me severely if I allow anything but death to separate us. When Naomi saw that Ruth was determined to go with her, she said nothing more. Finally, the moment she had been waiting for arrived. As Ruth's tired feet stepped across Bethlehem's threshold, she was home. She was finally home. But she had to keep herself together, for she was immediately recognized, and the excited chatter made her heart ache, for she was not the same Naomi that her friends once knew. She was bitter now. All life had been sucked out of her. Her empty heart was dry and bleak as the desert road she just walked. As her lifelong friends called out her name, she corrected them. Don't call me Naomi. Instead, call me Mara, for the Almighty has made life very bitter for me. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me home empty. It was late spring when Naomi and Ruth got settled, and it was the beginning of the barley harvest. Now, Ruth wasn't one to sit still and beg for bread, and she certainly didn't want her mother-in-law to succumb to such shame. She knew there was another way, a covenant way, and it involved a gleaning law established from the Sinai covenant. According to the law, there was to be no one destitute among the widows, orphans, and foreigners living in the promised land. All landowners were to leave the extra behind that were dropped from regular harvest. This extra belonged to the orphans, widows, and foreigners. This was God's hunger solution and allowed the poor to pick up the crops the harvesters dropped or missed. They were allowed to glean the fields of Bethlehem, but they had to ask permission first from the owner. With Naomi's approval and blessing, Ruth made her way to glean the barley fields one morning. Ruth may have planned her day, but it was God who ordained her steps, and she wound up exactly where she needed to be to begin her journey to redemption. For the field she found belonged to Boaz, who was also of the family of Elimelech. She went at work, determined to help make a better life for she and her mother-in-law. Even though she knew not a soul, she worked with all her heart to do what was right. Meanwhile, while she was there, the esteemed and very wealthy landowner of the fields, Boaz, arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters. "The Lord be with you," he called out to them. "The Lord bless you," they all replied in return. Naomi was amazed at the love and honor the harvesters had towards the owner. What a good, honorable man he must be, she thought to herself as she continued to glean. As Boaz merrily went about his way taking care of business, a beautiful woman whom he had never seen before caught his attention. He just had to know who she was, so he asked his foreman and found out all about her. After being filled in, he went over and said to Ruth, "Listen, my daughter, stay right here with us when you gather grain. Don't go to any other fields. Stay right behind the young women working in my field. See which part of the field they are harvesting and then follow them. I have warned the young men not to treat you roughly, and when you are thirsty, help yourself to the water they have drawn from the well." Boaz knew it was dangerous for a poor young woman, and a foreigner at that, who did not have the protection of a man, to be gleaning in a field full of strange men. So he had hoped his words might comfort and reassure her. Ruth fell at his feet and thanked him warmly. "What have I done to deserve such kindness?" she asked. "I am only a foreigner." "Yes, I know," Boaz replied, "but I also know about everything you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband. I have heard how you left your father and mother and your own land to live here among complete strangers. May the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge, reward you fully for what you have done." "I hope I continue to please you, sir," she replied. "You have comforted me by speaking so kindly to me, even though I am not one of your workers." As Ruth continued, she couldn't believe her good fortune. She knew Naomi must have been praying for her, but when Boaz asked her over to join a meal with him and the others, and to help herself to food, to dip her bread into the sour wine, which she knew was a luxury, it was more than she could ever have imagined. She was truly blessed, and she couldn't wait to share her day with Naomi later. She even packed some of the roasted barley away to give to Naomi that evening. As Boaz watched her gentle demeanor, it was as refreshing as the morning sun itself. He felt his heart swell in love and protection for Ruth, and ordered the young men to not bother her, but to go out of their way to drop some extra bundles on purpose, just for her. Ruth's day went greater than she could hope or imagine. She gathered so much grain, picking up bundles of barley at every corner, it seemed. The work of her hands filled an entire basket. She couldn't wait to show Naomi when she got home, and also share with her the tasty roasted grain that Boaz shared with her earlier in the day during their meal. Finally, her long day under the sun wound down, and she made her way home. "Where did you gather all this grain today?" Naomi was astonished. "Where did you work? May the Lord bless the one who helped you." Full of gratitude and wonder, Ruth told her mother-in-law all about Boaz and his field. "May the Lord bless him," Naomi told her daughter-in-law. "He is showing his kindness to us, as well as to your dead husband. The man is one of our closest relatives, one of our family redeemers." As they finished their meal together, Ruth told her how Boaz had asked her to stay with the harvesters until the entire harvest was completed. It was sweet melody to Naomi's ears, so Ruth worked alongside the women in Boaz's fields and gathered grain with them until the day of the barley harvest. Then she continued working with them through the wheat harvest in early summer, and all the while she lived with her mother-in-law. After some time, Naomi realized what was happening, and she came up with a plan. She was so excited. It was time to play matchmaker, and tonight the perfect setting would be cast. The winnowing banquet was to happen that very night, and Boaz would be there at the threshing floor. It was a time that promised the making of happy heart and easy spirits, where all could be free just for the night and lay all worries and concerns aside. for the hard work of the harvest was now finished. The well-deserved celebrating now began. So she instructed Ruth to bathe, dab her finest of perfumes, and put on her best of dresses. With dreamy hope, the bold and brave, yet selfless Ruth, dressed in careful detail, with deliberate intent to catch the eye of the wealthy landowner, Boaz, and to win his heart. Her sweet perfume danced in the evening breeze freely, her pounding heart awaiting in eager anticipation for her time, the chance to reveal her heart to the one she loved. She watched from the shadows with wonder, the easy joy that filled the night. The moon glistened and sparkled over the drinks that freely flowed like fountain streams. The aroma of rich roasted meats and the grand displays of salty feasts made her stomach grumble. Dust floated in merry ease amongst the chaff that swirled in dizzying proportions beneath the light feet of those dancing in celebration. It was a night of true wonder and enchantment, for here celebrated a community brought together from the fields and fruit of the honorable, esteemed Boaz. As she watched him smile and laugh in good spirits with others, although he was far away, Ruth could see the sparkle in his eyes, and her heart warmed more as she thought about the kindness he had showed her throughout the year. The warm meals, the plentiful water that quenched her thirst from working in the long, dry, and hot days. The new community and friendships he helped foster for her by allowing her to stay in his fields, and she thought about how he made her feel safe, loved, cared for. Finally, Boaz finished eating and drinking, and he lay down at the far end of the pile of grain on the threshing floor, as accustomed owners do to keep their property safe from bandits and thieves after the harvest. And sweet slumber finally met his eyes. Then Ruth came quietly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. Around midnight, Boaz suddenly awoke as the cool night's air had caused his feet to be uncovered. Why had his blanket been taken off? Was someone there to steal his harvest? He thought to himself, and turned over. "Who's there?" he called out. "Who are you?" he asked, his eyes still adjusting in the dark. "I am your servant, Ruth," she replied. Boaz blinked. He had to rub his eyes again. No, it couldn't be, he thought to himself, rubbing his eyes again, because surely he was still dreaming. But lo and behold, there at his feet this midnight was Ruth. "Spread the corner of your covering over me, for you are my family redeemer," she asked. But she was not only simply asking for a little warmth in the night. She was asking for something far greater, and he knew exactly what that meant. She was asking him to be her kinsman, redeemer, covering. She was asking for him to be her husband. Boaz had died and gone to heaven. This beautiful young woman wanted his hand, his heart, his covering. "The Lord bless you, my daughter," Boaz exclaimed, filled with all the happiness in the world. "You are showing even more family loyalty now than you did before, for you have not gone after a younger man." Boaz then explained there was just one caveat standing in the way. Another man, who was more closely related to claim her as kinsman redeemer, was still alive. He assured her he would take care of everything in the morning and settle the matters. And so, by giving her his word, the most binding oath an Israelite could promise, he vowed to her, "If he is not willing, then as surely as the Lord lives, I will redeem you." As the glowing embers still danced, and with dew glistening afresh across the fields, Ruth returned home as the stars still sparkled across the blanket of blue. She did so now, not only with a full heart, but with arms full of barley from her soon-to-be hopeful betrothed. At daybreak, without a moment to lose, Boaz left with a mindful determination to make her his. At once, he judiciously went to the town square to properly settle matters correctly with the nearest kinsman redeemer in the Elimelech line. The village was bustling with excited morning chatter, and goodwill filled the air. Another harvest had surmised, and the men caught up with the morning business as Boaz took a seat in the courtyard. Then, the man of the hour walked by, and Boaz called out to him, "Come over here and sit down, friend. I want to talk to you." So they sat down together in front of the 10 leaders Boaz had asked to sit as witnesses from the town. Boaz said to him, "You know Naomi, who came back from Moab. Well, she is selling the land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. I thought I should speak to you about it so that you can redeem it if you wish. If you want the land, then buy it here in the presence of these witnesses. But if you do not want it, let me know right away, because I am next in line to redeem it after you." The man replied, "All right, I'll redeem it." Then Boaz explained to him that by doing so, he would have to marry Ruth, the Moabite widow, as a requirement so that she can produce an heir to carry on the Elimelech name in order to keep the family land. When the man heard this, he understood the significance of this and knew what it would mean for his own estate, and in particular, his own children. It would put them at a disadvantage if there were another heir with whom to compete. And so, knowing the gravity of this estate jeopardization, he declined. Now, in those days, it was custom in Israel for anyone transferring a right of purchase to remove his sandals and hand it to the other party. This publicly validated the transaction. So, he took off his sandal and said to Boaz, "You buy the land," which meant Ruth was now his. This beautiful, courageous woman who had captured his heart completely was now his. So, with all the joy and pride one feels that comes with the announcing of a wedding engagement, Boaz said to the elders and to the crowd standing around, "You are witnesses that today I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Kilion, and Mahlon. And with the land I have acquired Ruth, the Moabite widow of Mahlon, to be my wife. This way she can have a son to carry on the family name of her dead husband and inherit the family property here in his hometown. You are all witnesses today." Then the elders and all the people standing in the gate replied, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make this woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, from whom all the nation of Israel descended. May you prosper in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem, and may the Lord give you descendants by this young woman who will be like those of our ancestor Perez, the son of Tamar and Judah." And so Boaz became Ruth's kinsman redeemer, and he took her to be his wife, and together they had a son. Naomi's once empty heart was now full, as she was a grandmother, and her family wealth and honor were restored. She cared for her grandson as if he were her very own. As she held the bundle of joy in her arms, the women of the town spoke a blessing over her. They said to Naomi, "Praise the Lord, who has now provided a redeemer for your family. May his child be famous in Israel. May he restore your youth and care for you in your old age. For he is the son of your daughter-in-law, who loves you and has been better to you than 7 sons. God honored this prayer and prophetic blessing on this child. For little did she know, as she held that bundle of joy in her arms, that she held the grandfather of the future king of Israel, David. He would become the greatest king in Israel's history, and from his bloodline would come eternal redemption through Jesus, our Lord, Savior, and King of all kings.